Where are we going?
We're going to Dice Days at the Niagara Military Museum.
Wargaming Roadtrips.
But we're not actually going to Dice Days. Not today, at least.
No, because it didn't make sense for us to record a road trip podcast because we didn't actually road trip down there.
No, we met there. We are heading somewhere now in the car.
Yep.
To check out a collection for sale on Kijiji, which for the UK listeners, that's like Gumtree, Canadian Gumtree, or I guess similar to Craigslist in America.
Don't the Americans have Kijiji?
I don't know. It's owned by eBay.
We had a technical error, so we recorded 20 minutes of the 20 minutes of the best podcast in the world.
Yeah, it was great. It was funny. We were witty. We were bouncing off each other.
Didn't feel like an interview. It felt like a conversation.
Yeah.
And
now it's gone.
And the energy went with it. So who knows what we're going to have this time.
Anyway, yeah, we're off.
What is this a collection of? I know you and I have discussed this already, but what are we picking up? Or we're just looking at it?
Yeah, someone's posted some vague photos of boxes of board games, and there's some miniatures there. They don't know anything about it. We're going to go check it out because we love
the treasure hunt.
We love treasure hunting.
That's almost a hobby in and of itself, though, for us in many ways, is the treasure hunt. We'll go to events where we're not anticipating doing anything other than seeing if we can find any treasures.
Yeah, I think a wise man once said, it's not hoarding if our stuff's cool.
Now, that's on one of our t-shirts, but I didn't come up with that.
Didn't you?
No,
Wait,
no.
Why would you assume that you were the wise man I was referring to?
Very fair.
So, Dice Days. I showed up late at 1 p.m. and you were looking ill.
Wednesday night, I started feeling not good. Thursday, that not good had turned into a full-blown sinus infection, probably one of the worst ones I've had. And Friday, if I could have cancelled, I would have done. What was initially supposed to be me and young Andrew setting up some tables, which we're really good at. We do this all the time. All the game nights, it's just me and young Andrew that set up the tables. We've got a really good shorthand. We're good at doing the head gestures to indicate which way we want to go with the tables. We can crack this out in 20 minutes, half an hour. I was so unwell that my wife ended up coming down with the girls.
On Friday?
On the Friday. Curator of the museum, Jim, he was helping, and Peterborough Chris, who just came to hang out because he drove down on the Friday night because it's a long way for him to drive Peterborough to Niagara Falls, and he ended up having to help. That's how under the weather I was, and I felt worse on Saturday morning. When I woke up, I was of the opinion that maybe I would be better off not going, but nothing would have worked if I hadn't been there.
So it was Dice Days at the Niagara Military Museum. The venue, an old armory. Upstairs was the parade hall.
Assembly hall upstairs. Parade ground is where we parked our cars.
Plenty of parking, which was always nice for a venue.
And what's nice is across the street they had paid parking, which was cheap.
And the main floor was the museum, an active museum. I came down with two of my kids, and they were treated to a private tour, which is pretty cool. He unlocked the armory for us, got to see some guns.
How did they like the museum versus the event itself?
The ride home, they were talking about the museum.
Yeah.
The curator, what was his name?
That's Jim. Jim's a curator of the museum. Is that the correct term?
The museum manager?
Museum guy? No, curator's the right term.
Sounds right.
Yeah, Jim's the curator.
He was able to give a full backstory to any artifact the kids pointed to. He seemed to know where it came from, when it was used.
What's very special about that museum is that he literally takes you on a private tour. When you come through that door, he'll come and talk to you and walk you through the whole place, and he knows everything that's in there. War of 1812, Fenian raids, World War I, World War II, Korea, Afghanistan. I think there's Cyprus stuff in there as well, but it also goes further back than the War of 1812. Super nice to have a museum like that hosting us, but I'm going to be very honest here. I didn't know that was even there.
Yeah. And I've done trips to Niagara to visit historic sites like Queenston Heights and, these landmarks from the War of 1812. And I had no idea there was a museum.
I really should know more about the War of 1812 because there's so much history right on our doorstep. But it's not a period that I've particularly engaged in. This isn't an area that I've got any expertise on.
But also at the same time as the War of 1812 was Napoleonic
If you're
back home.
Yeah, if you're in the UK, your focus for that period is most likely going to be what was going on in Europe.
I don't want to disparage Canadians, but War of 1812 almost seemed like a bit of a footnote to what was happening in Europe.
There was a really good episode of Meeples and Miniatures where they talked about the War of 1812. That was Mike, who was the Welsh wizard. He passed away just recently. He had written a really good scenario book for Sharp Practice. Mm-hmm. It's fair to say that a lot of my interest in the period came from listening to that episode. We live in Hamilton. There's the Battle of Stony Creek is in Hamilton.
Yeah.
Well, Hamilton now. It wasn't Hamilton then. The Hamilton Cemetery has the remains of the old gun emplacements and earthworks that they put in to protect the harbour.
Yeah.
Right through what is now the cemetery. Graves are built into the side of the old earthwork. So the history's all over the place here.
Going back to Dice Days, how did that come about?
That's not a short...
We just lost 20 minutes of quality podcast, so let's get the long answer.
The long answer?
we need space filler.
20 minutes. Okay. So the long answer is that during COVID, I was on the Anything But a One podcast, and that came about because I had commented on one of their previous episodes where they were talking about the graying of the hobby and how there's a perception that historical wargaming is aging out. Mm-hmm. Now, I don't necessarily disagree that historical wargamers in many cases are older than people playing Warhammer. I'd left a comment and a photo of young guys at the club playing Charlie Company. Now, Charlie Company is Ratham, and Ratham are just down the road here in Brantford. These were young gamers, about 8 of them, and they were aged 14 to 18, and they were playing Charlie Company. And this is a game that they had put on themselves. They weren't playing a game with an older club member or one of their parents. Yeah. They had assembled the army, put the terrain together, gathered their friends, and were playing a historical war game. So I had pointed out that maybe historical wargaming is aging out in other areas. In Hamilton, we're lucky that these young people are playing historical war games and playing them because they want to. They could play Warhammer if they wanted to, but they're playing a historical war game.
So you left a comment?
I left a comment. They invited me to come onto the show. I spoke about young people playing historical war games in our area. From that, Paul in Pittsburgh reached out to me via Facebook, asked me for some insight on getting young people playing historical miniature games. His purpose there was to do a talk at Historicon. So he did a Zoom call. There were several people on there. Rod Kane from FlintCon. Rod does a bunch of games where he'll go out and do Triumph. Yeah. And he takes it on the road. And there was the one fella there who does the 20-sided Gamified podcast. And we just spoke about our experiences of engaging young people in the hobby. Paul turned that into I don't want to say a lecture, a presentation at Historicon.
Historicon, the big gaming convention.
Historicon's the big gaming convention in the summer that both of us have never been to.
It's on the list. It would be a great place for a road trip.
It would be an amazing road trip. Could we be in the car for 6 hours?
With each other?
It's like 8 hours, isn't it? Oh, well, we'd need the podcast to distract ourselves.
So, Dice Days, get in the venue in Niagara, started with a Facebook comment, then a podcast invitation, and then a follow-up invitation for another conversation that was part of a presentation at Historicon.
And then Paul, who did the presentation at Historicon, he connected me with John, who's the tattooed historian, who's doing his PhD at Brock University. So that's real close to the Niagara Military Museum, and John invited us to come and do an event at the museum.
And a gaming convention was born.
I'm always reluctant to use the word convention.
Yeah, I mean, the intention for this was more of a community engagement day.
It very much was, I wanted a small event, but not too small, and I wanted to have local people come out and get involved. But Niagara Falls is a really tough place to organize stuff in, especially for me, because I'm from Hamilton. I don't know this area.
Yeah, it's 45 minutes away, but far enough that it's different. Different people, different...
It's 45 minutes if you don't hit traffic.
Yeah.
When we came down on Friday night, we hit traffic. You hit traffic when you came down.
One of the reasons why I was so late. Just one of the reasons.
Just one of the reasons. least. Wrangling 2 young kids to come out to an event isn't easy either, right?
Yeah, he had theater lessons in the morning.
Yeah. And then when you get stuck in traffic, their enthusiasm level starts dropping. So it's tough, right? I had to go on an American podcast. From that American podcast, I got connected to a guy in Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
And then that guy in Pittsburgh connected me to another American that connected us to a Canadian museum that's 45 minutes away that we had never heard of.
Putting your Facebook trolling comments to use then.
I guess. I wasn't trolling. I was being helpful, being a bit smug. Look at, we've got young gamers. You guys don't.
Yeah, so what was there? 12, 15 games on throughout the day?
I think it was 6 or 7 in each session.
I made a list.
You made a list?
I made a list of the games. I did, yeah.
Oh, so there we go. So you know the answer and you're asking me.
I haven't counted them though, have I?
You made notes.
I made some notes.
It feels like you've upended the entire podcast here by just making notes.
I mean, we should know what we're talking about for an event you organized and I attended.
People know we don't know what we're talking about.
But the morning sounded like it was great. Those officers' messes seemed like you had a RPG in there.
We had an RPG in the morning.
Dungeon Crawl Classics written down here.
That was the
No,
first
that's the
one.
afternoon. I got my list backwards.
Was Dungeon Crawl Classics in the morning or the afternoon? Because there were 2
That was in the afternoon. In the morning, I think you had Old School Essentials.
old school essentials.
A new GM.
That was a lady I didn't know particularly well. Actually, I didn't know her at all. She reached out to host a game. And again, I wasn't feeling well. And I really wanted to talk to them a little bit more, get a feel for how they felt they were doing with the event. No one wants Typhoid Mary in their face. And I was clearly not well.
Yeah.
Normally, I would spend a lot more time with a new GM. I knew everybody else there. So this was the only GM I didn't know. And I wasn't able to really engage with them on the day. My daughter played her first RPG in the morning with that GM. The photo that was in the local newspaper was of my daughter and my son playing in that game.
Hey, it made the local news.
It made the very local news.
Very local news.
Very local news. But it was nice to get that recognition.
I will say the energy was off. You weren't your normal bubbly self.
We had a lot of people coming through, and usually I would speak to these people, get a feel for what they wanted to play, and get them playing something.
Yeah.
But I really wasn't able to do that, and I really feel the event suffered because I wasn't feeling well. There was actually quite a few people came from Buffalo and Niagara Falls on the American side, and I couldn't get them playing. They may not have wanted to actually play something because I spoke to 2 of them and they both said, well, we just really wanted to come and have a look.
Yeah.
And they had the option to play. The GMs were there reaching out to them and they were just kind of circulating, looking at things. So maybe I'm making an assumption on my part that if I'd been feeling better, I'd have got more people playing. But these guys, they know what they want to do. So if they didn't feel like they wanted to commit to a game, maybe they just didn't feel like they wanted to commit to a game.
So that was the RPGs.
1 RPG in the morning.
Yep.
And there was another RPG in the afternoon, which was the
Grand River fellas.
Yeah, Grand River Tabletop Gaming Society.
So the war games, I mean, you're there at the Niagara Military Museum. Having that theme in the games was pretty cool to see. There was some sharp practice with Wargaming 12 and some 15mm LaSalle 2.
I don't know LaSalle very well, but that was a Niagara game too, right?
Yeah, both of those were Niagara themed. I mean, it's right there where U.S. troops were crossing the Niagara River and the garrison at Queenston and the militia had to hold them off until reinforcements would arrive. So it's kind of the perfect place to put these games on.
Are you just reading the description of the event that I put on the internet?
Maybe. No, these are my notes.
Are your notes just what I wrote and you printed them out?
I wasn't there in the morning. What?
I was so excited. I was like, wow, Dan made notes.
Dan's contributing.
But you just printed out what I wrote.
Hey, it's more than you printed out and brought with you.
That's very true. Well, I am driving. What
You are.
Would you like me to print stuff out and read them while I'm driving? I can do that. You don't even like it when I drink my Tims while I'm driving. Never mind read notes.
In the morning, I also missed the DBA tournament.
So yeah, the DBA guys came with the intention of running a tournament, and they actually ended up just playing in, I think, the Chain of Command game.
Well, that's a shame.
It is a shame, but if there isn't a local DBA community, it's a long way for people to come to participate in a tournament from Toronto or Hamilton or further afield. Now, Hamilton has a good DBA community, and I think there's a solid DBA community in Toronto, but I don't know Niagara Falls gamers who are playing DBA.
For those who may not be familiar, it's De Bellis Antiquitatis. I don't speak Latin, but I find it quite an accessible game to just pick up and learn and play that same day. The rules are not complex. It's 15 millimeter, but the armies are still multi-base, so it's quite small. It's much more akin to chess than some other board games might be.
I'm not saying you're wrong, because a lot of people do tell me that DBA feels more chess-like, but that's not a selling feature to me. Do you still have your DBA armies?
I do. I learned at that one tournament at Broadsword in Hamilton, maybe 6 years ago.
Oh, I think that's close to 7 years ago that we had. It's at least 6.
I learned that day and somehow won the tournament. I think there was like 12, 15 people there.
That was Howard organizing that one. Howard has since moved from Toronto, and now he's like an hour and a half further north.
Oh,
than
up
Toronto.
north? Yeah, it's hinterlands up there.
That's like different country, different planet. That's like the moon. 5 minutes outside of Toronto is unknown territory to me.
Played in the tournament with a loner army, and then went and bought my own. I don't know if my army's ever been on the table.
Didn't you get that at FlintCon?
A complete army?
Yeah.
No.
Because there was a nice guy giving away 15mm armies at FlintCon.
I don't think I got a complete army. I know I've gotten a lot of 15mm models from FlintCon. Other historical games, there's Wings of War. Saw that on the table. Chain of Command. Was that Canadian themed at all?
I don't know. You've got the description.
The German war machine is pushing to cross the River Seine.
And they're not French Canadians, they're just French.
And then I saw the lovely big pirate ships. I'm assuming that was the Blood and Plunder.
That was Blood and Plunder. Those fellas came a bit later, maybe because they got stuck in traffic. They ended up packing away and playing in your game that you played in the afternoon, the zombie game.
That was good fun, yeah. That was the Attack of the Office Zombies. And he had, I don't know, were they Japanese or some kind of action figures, but a whole little modern office set up with these action figures.
So that's Sean from the Wednesday Night Painters group. He's from Buffalo. He came up from the States.
Sean put on a Shaun of the Dead meets Office Space.
I didn't actually think of that, but that's correct. Sean put on a Shaun of the Dead meets Office Space zombie game.
It was a great game for the kids because, you were controlling just one model.
But you really liked it too. It wasn't just a great game for the kids. It was a great game. It was a great game for Dan.
Yeah, I like tabletop games when there's that creative RPG element where you can ask the GM, hey, can my guy do a somersault across the office cubicle and grab that fire extinguisher?
What rule set was that?
I think it was his own.
It was his own?
We picked characters randomly, and the one I draw happened to be the vegan activist.
You just happened to pick the vegan activist.
Yeah, the disgruntled office vegan activist. He had a special ability that his aroma was quite poor, that the zombies felt as one of their own. I don't relate with that part of the character, but...
Unfortunately, we do relate you to that part of the character. No, honestly, you're not that bad. For a gamer.
Doesn't smell that bad for a gamer.
For a gamer.
Lee from Crucible Crush was there with his colonial historical pulp game.
That's his new game, right? He's
still working on the rules for that. Okay. And Mortal Gods, we played at Ragnarok. That was on the table with his gorgeous, is it Terrainify?
Terrainify is where the terrain's from, and that's his sponsor, and that's who we forgot last time.
His sponsor. Not our sponsor, because no one's going to sponsor this.
No one's ever going to sponsor this.
If we did have a sponsor, we might be able to afford microphones that wouldn't break and we wouldn't lose half of the first take of the podcast.
To be fair, I forgot to attach the cable. And because I'm driving, it wasn't something I was able to check. Yeah. So it's my fault. A poor craftsman always blames his tools. In this case, it was all me. I'm the poor craftsman.
Did I also see Pike and Shot from Warlord Games on the table?
Oh, yeah, that was Sean's huge game. I haven't played much Pike and Shot, but I'm always impressed by how nice it looks on the table. We've had a few different games of Pike and Shot at the club, and Sean is usually the host. Ralph hosted a game with the Conquistadors in Latin America, fighting the locals.
With Pike and Shot rules?
With Pike and Shot rules, with some adaptations here and there. And again, a really visually impressive game that seems to move very fast. I've not played a lot of the Warlord games. I played Black Powder a few times, a little bit of Black Seas. You like Black Seas, don't you? That's the one game where you set everything on fire.
Oh yeah, that's so much fun. Just where I happen to set ships on fire.
You have a skill. You
Yeah.
have a knack.
Burn down both fleets.
In other games I've played of Black Seas, nowhere near as much stuff catches fire. But when you play, everything's on fire.
That's how I win. Just torch everything down. Sail to victory.
But it's not something you can plan. That's a random thing.
No, you can plan. You can plan.
Oh, you can plan?
I think people playing naval games tend to avoid collisions between ships because in real life they're quite costly. But it's much more fun, coming from a background of Gorka Morka, when you just ram each other. Which leads to the fires. Nelson had a big Star Wars game.
Nelson realized that we were playing on May the 4th,
Yeah.
and so offered to put a Star Wars game on. Lovely looking game. Everyone loves Star Wars.
It's always great at a con as well for drawing people in.
I'm not a huge Star Wars fan, or I didn't used to be, but now Disney's been doing these TV shows. My youngest daughter really likes The Mandalorian, Baby Yoda, and that's got us watching all the other Star Wars shows.
So you're catching up.
I'm kind of rediscovering it again.
Yeah.
I'd not had a reason to rewatch it all, so now we're watching it all again.
Just to bring it back, I mentioned that while we don't have a sponsor, the event had a sponsor.
Yeah, Wargames Atlantic and Sarissa Precision. Wargames Atlantic sent us Napoleonic Riflemen.
Cool, so suitable for 1812.
Perfect for the period.
Great for the theme of the event.
Very generous of them. I was able to give everyone that came in a sprue. People that were walking around looking at the event, I gave a few of them sprues as well. I wasn't feeling great, as we've already discussed, and I'm laboring the point, but I wasn't able to get out there and really push these sprues on people and explain to them what they were. But the people who got them were absolutely fascinated by them. One woman even said, "Oh, so this is a hobby all by itself, putting them together."
Yeah, my kids were chuffed to get the sprues. I think it was their first multi-part miniatures. They've built vehicles before, toy cars and that, but all the miniatures they've had have always been single piece. So figuring out glue and knives, it's going to be a new challenge for them.
Well, you can just use clippers, you know that, right? You don't have to go straight to knives.
We also found some deals on some Reaper miniatures from one of the vendors there, Crucible Crush.
Their stuff is so versatile.
My kids picked up with some aliens and some alien hunters for whatever homebrew RPG they're playing at their after-school club.
I would suggest you try one of the 2-hour war games with them, because it's super easy.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm not involved at all. They've just, I don't know if some other kids have introduced it to them. They're just off on their own. So it's nice that they have some models to contribute.
So that happened completely separate from your influence?
They don't even want to talk to me about it.
Oh, it's a secret. It's a secret project.
Yeah.
Maybe it's because they know you ruin it.
Yeah, maybe
they
that's
take it too seriously.
And here are the rules of the game, and
No,
don't you dare stray from how it's written.
Deviate. Yeah.
There was another vendor there, I think.
Don was there with 5 arrows. He was clearing out his 20mm and his Osprey books. And somehow I managed not to buy any Osprey books.
Hey, that's an accomplishment.
It's because I wasn't feeling well.
Yeah. You were so ill you didn't even buy an Osprey book.
That's how ill I was. Sarissa Precision sent us a big MDF boat, 28mm flagship Niagara, which I was going to do for a GM prize.
Yeah.
It never showed up. Canada Post strikes again.
Still never showed up.
It's still never. I don't have it. I've been holding off talking to them about it because it never showed up.
Where's Sarissa based?
They're in the UK.
It's so hard to explain to people the frustrations we have with Canada Post.
So how was it? Apart from showing up late.
I showed up about half hour before the afternoon session started, so got a chance to check out the morning games as they were being tidied up. And then, had good fun playing the Office Zombies. It was the first time I dragged the boys out to a wargaming event.
This was the first time?
The first time, yeah.
Oh, nice.
I mean, I think the 10-year-old came out to a few game nights.
Yeah, I remember seeing him
back when he wasn't a 10-year-old. But yeah, first time taking them out, and they were quiet at the event, but the car ride home, they were excitedly talking about all the cool stuff they saw at the museum, and then how much they enjoyed the zombie game they were playing. It was good fun. From your perspective, though, being someone cut down with the lurgy.
I think it went better than I anticipated it was going to go. Organizing events in Niagara Falls has always been difficult, especially when we're not from Niagara Falls. So even people in Niagara Falls have had difficulty organizing events down there. I think it might just be a lack of historical gamers in that area. There just isn't enough of them to get behind an event to push it forward.
Because there's a massive Warhammer crowd down that way.
Oh yeah, so it's clearly not, there's no gaming. It's just difficult to get people down there behind it. We had invited 2 local stores to come, and they just ceased communicating with me. They knew the event was happening and they didn't choose to contribute. That's fine. They've got their own thing to do. They don't have to roll the dice on an event they don't know about. But that might be indicative of why it's hard to get independent events off the ground there. We've never really needed or pushed for local stores to get behind our events in Hamilton.
No, it's always been separate.
It's always been separate.
And we've been invited, I know stores have reached out to say, hey, do you want to advertise your event in the shop?
We've chosen not to.
Mostly because it would take effort.
Well, no, it's not that. We've chosen not to do that because we want to be as independent as possible. And because there's so many stores locally in Hamilton, we don't want one to feel that we're behind one more than the other.
Yeah, and it's something that both you and I had game clubs in the UK, and they were completely independent from any shop. Mine was running a church hall, and that's not something that is common in Canada, I don't think. And I think it's something that's quite, special.
The Trumpeter Club that's in Vancouver, they're actually very closely connected to Imperial Hobbies there, like very close. And that's a really good working relationship, and I think that's driven by the fact that Imperial Hobbies doesn't have a big playing space in the store, so it benefits them to support the local club. They even offer Trumpeter Club members a discount at their store, but maybe that's also because they're really the only store, or were when I was there, the only store that was catering to that market. So there wasn't an issue of one store being supported more than the other because there was really only one big store, which was Imperial Hobbies.
Yeah, on that, I really like the DIY aspect of the hobby. I'm not personally into 3D printing, but I really appreciate that too. And I don't know how comfortable I'd be playing in a store with homemade models just because, it's taken away from their business. So you're a bit more free to be creative with an independent club.
If you were playing in a store and not a single thing that you were playing with had come from that store, that's something you would be conscious of.
Yeah. Did you get any feedback from the museum about the event?
Jim, who's the curator, was really happy with how that went. He really loved the games. He thought the War of 1812 games were just beautiful. And I think he'd never really seen miniature war games presented like this before. He was very, very happy to have us there, happy to have people that were knowledgeable, happy to have people that were interested. He was showing people all around the museum. From that perspective, I felt this was very successful. The curator of the museum was happy. His parking lot was full. We had people who'd never been to this museum before showing up.
Yeah.
And that's great because it was able to get their social media presence up. So I was happy.
Was there a fundraising aspect too?
Yeah. So we were asking people to give at least $5, and a lot of people gave more. I don't know exactly how much we raised because we were just giving it straight to the museum, but Jim was very happy. The museum was very happy. I met a listener.
We have a listener?
And I met him.
And you met him.
It was a very surreal thing because I was expecting him to say the same things that our emails have said, but he was saying nice things. Maybe it's because I'm right in front of him and I'm a big guy, but he was saying nice things. This was back when we had 60 total downloads or whatever it was, 72. In my fever-addled mind, I'm trying to do the math on how much of our listener base this one person represents.
One person, 3% of our core audience.
4.5%. I can't even do the math now, and I don't have a fever. It was nice because this is a fella that had spoken to me at the Bring and Buy that we organize every year. That's the bazaar we organize.
The Hamilton Tabletop Gaming Society Bazaar.
I had introduced him to some gamers out of Burlington, and he arrived with those guys. For me to be able to get those guys connected, I really enjoyed that. Speaking of connections, one of the people that we met at Heritage Con, he ended up coming for Dice Days, and that was the first gaming event he'd ever participated in. Just why we do it is to get these people connected.
Those connections, I think, are so important, especially here locally, now that the Hamilton Tabletop Gaming Society is a club without a regular venue. So we're reaching our destination now. Drive's coming to an end.
So the whole purpose of this road trip
is to go and check out some stuff.
Talking about something we did a month ago.
Let's get in there and check it out.
Let's do it. So how was that, Danny boy?
Yeah, so that was disappointing.
Just to reiterate what was going on there, we came up here to look at some board games and some miniatures.
Yeah, it was a collection she didn't know much about. Some pretty poor quality photos. We said we'd take a look at it, and yeah, not much there for us at least.
I'm sure at one time this was a fantastic collection of stuff, but it's sitting in an unfinished basement for at least 3 years, directly on the concrete floor.
Most of it was cardboard-based board games.
She had photographs of miniatures, but she didn't have them. So she clearly already sold those.
Yeah.
And not disclosed that to you.
It looked like there were some old 80s miniatures. Yeah, we couldn't find those in the boxes. I mean, this is clearly someone's estate.
Yeah, well, she said it was her brother's stuff.
It could have been that the estate took time to settle and she couldn't have touched, or it could have been emotional and she just couldn't have dealt with it. Yeah, it was in a pretty bad state at this point.
I think what happened is she really wanted to use the room where this was previously stored, piled it all up in the storage room in the basement, forgot about it, and then somehow connected that this stuff was worth money. And maybe it was worth money when it was originally purchased, but it's not worth anything now.
Yeah, she clearly had high expectations. I think she looked at some of these items on eBay, saw the price tag, without realizing that those eBay listings were for items in pristine condition, which was clearly not this.
This is always hard for me to see because I've had to deal with so many people's collections, and fairly recently I had a friend at the club who was terminally ill. He had requested that his family pass on his collection so I could sell it to help out the club. I ended up giving a lot of it away, and the reason for that was when I got hold of it, it was in such poor condition, it wasn't something you could resell.
Yeah.
They had just bundled everything into boxes, and then when I went to pick them up, they literally slung them into my truck.
Breaking all the miniatures. Also, when dealing with things in such a large quantity, it becomes overwhelming. When they get mixed together, you have no idea what went where, what's supposed to be part of which army. It can get confusing.
I also understand that this is overwhelming for a family to deal with. They don't know what it is, how it's supposed to be organized, and they don't have an appreciation for how delicate it is. But it's still really tough to see that.
Yeah, you've dealt with this a few times. I've seen you post on Facebook about the importance of writing a will and making sure all this stuff is accounted for, what you want done with it.
You're right, I've had to deal with this a bunch. I can fully understand how this is overwhelming for someone to deal with. So that's why I urge people to make a legal will. If something was to happen to somebody we know and it was clearly laid out that these two guys are to go over and go through my stuff and get it out the house as quickly as possible so you don't have to deal with it. To me, that's the ideal. Years ago when I was at a club in the UK, the club was left thousands of figures and it was in a will.
Yeah.
But there was no timeline in place for this stuff to get out of there. So the club left it and left it and left it, trying to be delicate. They didn't want to look like they were vultures, but they left it so long that the widow just had it all thrown out because she couldn't deal with it anymore. It's easy for us to not understand how overwhelming this is. Hundreds and hundreds of little things that go together in a specific order.
It's such a delicate issue, and I know a lot of gamers say, I don't care what happens after I die, just get rid of it all. But I think that is burdening the families as well. Because some of people's collections are quite massive.
Yeah.
And, just get rid of it all. What does that mean,
Speaking about this, at Hot Lead, there were 2 gamers' estates being sold. 2 separate estates.
Yeah, and at the Hamilton Sales Day, doesn't your wife usually have a table with a bunch of estate stuff people have left to the club?
Yeah, it's estate stuff and things that people have donated. The last few times, it's mostly been board games that came from a gamer that passed away in Niagara Falls, and the family asked us to sell it.
It's always priced really well, too, because these are people who want their games to be played, find new homes for it.
It's priced to move. We don't want to store it. My wife absolutely doesn't want to store it. It needs to be played.
Yeah.
This person wanted their games to be played after they died. Otherwise, they'd have just told the family to throw it away. And if we're able to make some money for the club, then that's great.
Speaking of the sales day, we should set a date for that. It's been a couple of years, hasn't it?
No, it was last year.
Oh, I bailed on it, didn't I?
No, you didn't. You were there. You were vending.
Forgot already.
That was the year before.
The year before, I just assumed I bailed because that's my...
it's your default.
It was the year before I was invited to a work event in the US. Had to leave.
2022 you bailed last minute, but that's
what I feel bad about because I've been organizing that with you, and that takes a lot of work.
It's a lot of work.
Yeah.
The sales day is a big event because it's so fast.
Yeah.
We open the doors at 12 and we're gone by 3.
Fast, and it's not our local group is there, our local community is there, but people come from quite far away for this event too. So it's fast, and it's people who may not be as patient with us.
Well, it's intense because people are trying to get bargains and people are trying to sell things. They don't want to be going home with everything that they bought, but it's also really busy. There's over 300 people. That's when I stopped counting is at 300. Yeah. So it's probably closer to 400, really. And they're in and out of that place.
The people queue up down Barton Street half hour before we tell them the doors are going to open. So we started doing those for a few reasons. Fundraising for the Veterans Association that hosted us, then to clear out some of our own junk. And because we like treasure hunting.
Yep. But that worked against us because
we're too busy to shop.
Too busy.
Oh, it was the worst. It's heartbreaking when you see amazing things walk out right from under your nose.
That happened to me last time. And I'm organizing this event and I don't even get to see the good stuff.
Without a venue though, will we be doing it again, you think?
Finding a venue is proven tough. It's either no parking, too expensive, badly situated in the sense that there's no public transit, or it's in a weird part of Hamilton. People don't know how to get there.
It's hard to get past. The motivation is...
We've certainly lost our reason for being in the sense that we started the club as a fundraiser for the Veterans Association. With the Veterans Association being closed, it's very hard to get the motivation to go out there and find a new venue when the whole purpose is kind of being lost.
Maybe we'll save this conversation and pick it up next time. I think one of the local game stores here have their annual auction coming up soon. So maybe we can take a road trip out there and...
Well, it won't be much of a road trip. It's 8 minutes away from my house.
You take the long way around.
We could.
We do end up spending a lot of time there during their auction. They have a silent auction in the morning and then a couple hour break and then a live auction. Maybe we can do a live episode.
Well, I don't think we'll live stream, but we could record right there.
Record from the game shop.
We could try. See how that works out for us.
How do we end these things?
Like that. But not for a gamer. Just for a normal person.